Hello and welcome back. We are going to talk about artwork from the Africas, Oceania, and the Americas. So to start off, we're going to talk about Africa. For the most part, we are going to talk about some of the work that it's coming from the north, the Sahara region. A lot of the artwork from this region is very influenced by Egypt, Rome, and the Islamic traditions. We usually refer to the artwork from this area as sub-Saharan Africa. And here is an overview of some of the regions of the works we are looking at. Sierra Leone, Ghana. We are going to see something from the Kingdom of Benin, Cameroon, Congo. We looked at work from the Great Zimbabwe earlier this semester, if you guys can remember that. And let's take a look at the first work of art here. When it comes to looking at these traditional indigenous works of art, one of the ways to differentiate them from works of art in other areas is the material. So if you were to guess, what do you think the material of this work might be? What is the media of this piece? If you are thinking clay, then very good. This is the head from Nok culture from Nigeria, made around 500 BCE to 200 CE. When we are looking at this work of art, you can say a lot of it is very abstract. Despite the abstraction, the facial expression is very, very strong, very vivid. And this, again, is some of the earliest works of art from Africa. You're probably wondering, why is there not, or there hasn't been enough earlier works than this, say 1000 BCE and so on. A lot of those works aren't really lasting long, so it's very rare to find any works of art from before this time. And now let's take a look at another work of art. This one is a little bit more recent. Right away, we can say that this work of art is a lot more naturalistic. It's almost as it's almost as real as looking at a sculpture from the Renaissance era. And what makes this portrait different from the sculptures that we've seen in the past? Well, for one, you're probably looking at some of the interesting dots or circles or holes on this piece. What people are saying is that this used to have traces of hair plugged into it, or traces of fibers. Another interesting characteristic is the lines on the face. Many parallel lines, many vertical lines. And you're probably asking, what is that all about? Well, one thing that is prominent in Africa was the use of scarification. Scarification is this type of way to mark those who are a particular rank. So say that you are a high member in this tribal society. They wouldn't, wear a particular uniform. Instead, they would actually give themselves these markings on their face. And so what happens with scarifications is they actually cut into the skin, and that they allow for it to heal. and after time, of course, those lines remain, and so it was a very good indication of the person, the things that they have accomplished in their life. Usually it was really given to those of the upper or the more important class. And so this is from Ife, a Yoruba city in southwest Nigeria. Male portrait head, and this is in bronze. So in Africa, this was 13th century. You can tell that it was done with a high skill of metalwork. And now let's move on to another sculpture here. You can say this too is also very naturalistic. Something that I'm going to ask you to remember is what culture are these works of arts from? Remember their titles and where they're from. And so this sculpture here looks similar to the one that we just saw, except this has a little bit more hints of abstraction, especially with what is happening in the head area, or perhaps it is a helmet of some sort, from Benin, the Benin head, 1550, metalwork bronze. So for a work like this, it was a very difficult work of art to accomplish. You can say that in Africa, they were ahead in terms of their technology in working with metals. Back then, this Benin culture is a very prestigious culture in that they had a secret in how to produce these works of art out of bronze. Okay, and so we have another work from Africa. And you can say there's a lot more happening with the abstraction, but in terms of the natural features, it seems to be pushed towards a different direction. It's as though there's a little bit more expressive qualities, especially with the textures in the skin. If you look at the top, it appears that the figure is wearing a headdress of some sort, and there are these interesting creatures on the top. And you're probably wondering, what are those little creatures on the head of this person here? Is this person a royalty, member of the royalty in the tribe, or maybe is the person a soldier of some sort? And to go back on the little creatures on the head, those are actually mudfish. Mudfish found, I believe, in Ghana, in the Ghana area, and that there was a high respect for these animals, these mudfish. There's this idea that the mudfish, they survive by living in pockets of mud, so there's a little bit of moisture, but the mudfish are supposed to be living in water. So these fish are actually living out of water. But how do they survive? They actually find a way to stop their own metabolism. They can, in a way, prevent themselves from having to depend on oxygen for months, and they can live in pockets of mud for a very, very long time. And these are some really interesting creatures. I would suggest looking them up. So this African culture had a high respect for these animals, for these creatures, and so they are being portrayed on this ivory mask, or a pendant mask, also from the court of Benin, from Nigeria. And what we are looking at here is actually a queen mother. And so what she's wearing is a crown of some sort. And these mudfish are represented. Okay, and we are looking at another thing here. And right away, you can probably say they are engaged in some sort of ritual. So it looks like they are in a dance and that they are wearing these costumes. Something about the costumes themselves, we have a lot of these very long fiber-like materials draping over the body. It looks almost like hair. And on top, on the crown, we have very abstract animals. And just from looking at the animals, they are actually a male and female version of this animal. And this is from Mali. They're actually carved wooden antelope figure headdresses. And this here is Tiawara dancers from Mali. And so what they are doing is they are engaged in a dance performed to imitate mythology of male and female Tiawara. So Tiawara is more about a fertility dance. And so you can see that on the wooden antelope there's a male version and the female version. If you see the creature or the antelope on the right, that's the female version, because you can see that there's a baby on the back of the female version. Something about African art in general is they have a lot of very intricate wood carvings, they have a lot of very intricate stone carvings, and a lot of very complex works of art made in fiber. Okay, so we are looking at another work here, also very abstract, especially with the interesting pattern on the upper section. Every characteristic of this work here is very abstract, and we are looking at it and thinking, yes, it looks like we are looking at a face here. I see two very large eyes, a big large forehead, a nose. We see lips, cheekbones, and so you can say that in Africa they have a very interesting abstract way to portray people. Something about this style here, you'll probably recognize it from looking at some famous work by Picasso. Has anyone ever seen Picasso's work? He usually draws these very abstract characters with very interesting positioned eyes. He actually was inspired by a lot of the works from Africa. And this is from the Cameroon area. Large dance headdress. Style far removed from Ife in Benin. So the works of art from this area is very different from the other parts. Another popular style of work that came from Africa are these Yoruba posts from Nigeria. And again, we are looking at a very intricate wood carving. We are looking at these abstract figures layered on top of each other. Something about these works of art, perhaps they are ancestors of the people that live in the house. And so if you can imagine them living in a house, you would often see these types of house posts in front of them. And so this is what it actually looks like in front of someone's home. So we have multiples of these Yoruba posts. Okay, so now you're looking at another work from Africa. Very abstract, but very expressive as well. A sense of vigor and strength coming from the character. If you look at the head there and how expressive the eyes are, it has a very interesting gaze. Something about this figure. On the body, you'll notice there are nails being hammered into the body. And so this is called the mangaka power figure by the Yombe people in the Republic of Congo. And what they use this for is really for things like civil cases and law. So pretend that we are in a city council and that we are trying to discuss some matters and, you know, trying to decide on something for the city, trying to decide on something for the people. And of course, you're going to have different sides. You're going to hear opinions from multiple people, and then they're going to decide on something altogether. And once they do that, they say, okay, this is what's going to happen. Let's make it official. We'll get a nail, hammer it into this mangaka power figure, and call it a done deal. So that is why you see so many nails on here. In a way, you could see it as a form of accomplishment that the community is finding ways to work together. Okay, another interesting sculpture from Africa, still very abstract. The royal portrait figure from the Kuba people's 18th century, 22 inches, so fairly tall. And this is made to commemorate this person here, Siam the Great. He is actually the founder of the Kuba people. The Kuba culture was around the 16th and 18th century, a very prestigious culture, and that this person was the main founder. And so some interesting facts about this piece within that area. If there was to be a new successor, they would have to keep this one. They would have to keep this statue. The successor would actually sleep with the statue to facilitate transmission of wisdom. So if you were to own this, then you would have embodied the power of the previous leader. And so it also mentions the replica created if a royal portrait statue is damaged. So if there was something wrong with it, if it broke somehow, then there would be a replica made. Okay, so some other important works of art that came from Africa are these textiles from the Kente region in Ghana. And so only the very important people were allowed to wear this. Worn when something unprecedented happened, famously worn by Kwame Nkrumah of Ghana when he won the national election for president. So only people of high prestige are allowed to wear these types of textiles. And I'm going to go ahead and pause there. We are going to talk about the oceanic area pretty soon.